All right. Hey, welcome everyone. Good crowd today. There's a lot of echo in the room, so if you're in the back, you might have trouble making a lot of this out. I am going to talk really fast because there is a ton to get through in this talk. I built it as a 2-hour presentation, and we're going to do it in one, which does mean I skip over a lot of stuff. But I just want to make sure that you're able to make out what I'm saying because I'm going to be talking very fast. So right now, if you're having trouble understanding me in the back, coming up towards the front seems to help. But outside of that, your call. Get your cameras out. These slides overall are very nutrient dense. There's going to be a lot of information on them. So also, it's another reason you might want to move up towards the screen because the text might start getting really small at times. Let me make sure my mouse is over here. I can at least do that for you, but we'll see how much that helps. This is, you got a QR code here, which is going to take you to my link tree, which will have links to where all of the slides are for all of my talks, including this one. So grab that where you can. Outside of that, we're gonna dive in. This is me, Johnny Christmas. I'm the global head of offensive security at Kraft Heinz. Yes, the food company. Yes, you can't go probably a day without putting something of ours in your mouth, and that is a devastatingly dangerous place to be. That is my job, is to assist in making sure that people are not getting poisoned, among other things. And that's why I look like this all the time. Here's a list of other jobs I have done. I'm not going to spend too much time on here. You can just Google me if you really give a crap that much. Other than I like to point out, hey, I went to music school, and yet here I am. So if I could do it, you're probably going to do it way better than I can. Jumping in. Why am I here? Why am I doing this talk? Why am I doing a talk that is about how to break into corporations? It's, the obvious answer I think we all know is like, well, it's so you know what to defend against, right? So you as a defender know what's happening out there and what you should be looking for and what to do about it. Why would I make my job harder? Especially, way back when I was a consultant, I was pen testing all the time at many different companies, and a lot of pen testers would be like, dude, don't fucking stop telling people this stuff. Making my job hard. It's because it got boring. I got really, really, really sick of doing the same thing at every company that I would go to. I'd go in and go, all right, well, let me run this tool set, let me run that tool set, feed the this into that. I had automated so much stuff that I was falling asleep, and I hated it, and it sucked. And I think a lot of us have learned that it doesn't matter how much you get paid. If you're bored, man, you're bored. And so I developed this talk to kind of put together every year the low-hanging fruit that we are seeing at a lot of these large corporations. This is going to be focusing on those large corporations because, as I discovered again as a consulting pen tester, the larger the company, the more of an attack surface they have, the more the blind spots they have, the more they're not focusing on the easiest stuff that's out there to bypass, get a foothold, et cetera, et cetera. And so I wanted to put this out there so that you guys can fix all this crap, which makes the pen testers try harder, which makes them happier, whether they like it or not. If it doesn't make them happier, they shouldn't be pen testers, that's for sure. Two, it helps you get a lot more bang for your buck if you are on the defensive side when you invariably hire in that penetration tester. You don't want to pay somebody 200, 300K to come in and do nothing, like skate through your environment, hack the crap out of everything, give you the finger, and go home. That's not useful to you. Why did you pay for that? What you want to do is you want to pay them 300K and make them work for it. You want them to find things that you would have never found on your own. That's why you're paying them. And so by covering up all of these little tiny, well, sometimes huge, I call them low-hanging fruit spots, that's going to really help you in getting the most bang for your buck when you bring in that penetration testing firm. I'm going to be talking just a very tiny bit. After each segment, I have slides on what do I do about the things you just told me. I'm going to say, here's how we break in, and then you're going to say, what am I supposed to do? I do have a slide at the end, sometimes a few slides. I'm going to be skimming over them for the sake of time. Like I said, that QR code in the beginning, and yes, it's at the end, is going to allow you to get the slides, which have tons of information on what to do about the things I'm telling you. I'll try to cover them briefly, time permitting, but that's why I give the slides for you guys to be able to download and see what's out there. So, excuse me. What we use as penetration testers, and also because we're just simulating adversaries, right? Penetration testing is just good penetration testing is adversarial simulation. We're simulating what the criminal organizations and sometimes independent criminals out there are doing, and they're using a framework. They're following a framework. Professional penetration testers follow a framework to make sure that they are creating consistency across all of their engagements, to make sure that they have done everything at each stage, because there's a lot to do at each stage. Criminals are doing the same thing because they're getting exceptionally complex, and they know like every minute that they waste is a minute they could get caught in, or B, just a minute of their money that they're just blowing on doing nothing. So generally the way that this flows, what I use here is called the Penetration Testing Execution Standard, or the PTES. You got a UR there, you can go look it up yourself. It is a massive document hammered out by definitely some names you'll recognize if you start looking at the authorship on that framework. It's great. And it walks through basically this loop that goes over and over until you're done, whatever done might mean. Done is defined based on the engagement, what the goal of the engagement is. If you're an adversary, is the goal to get into where the credit card numbers are stored? Is it to find the personal data? Is it to transfer funds out of the corporation? Is it to steal intellectual property? Whatever your goal is, that's going to shift sort of what you're doing. That's really going to shift like the final stage of like, okay, how do I get to this? Generally, we're always following this loop. It starts with intelligence gathering, where we're starting, for the sake of this conversation, this talk, what we're doing, I call it couch to compromise. We're starting from the couch. It's me on my couch. I have a laptop, I have an internet connection, I have a company name. That's all I got. Hyper black box, right? So we start with doing our intelligence gathering. We figure out what there is to see out there. We figure out where the weak points are. We then figure out how to exploit those weak points. And that's going to allow us initial access. That's going to allow us persistence. That's going to allow us maybe lateral movement. And then once we're in there, once we have a foothold and we're somewhere in a brand new environment, say moving externally to internally, then we start our post-exploitation, which is, again, that's usually your persistence. That's where you're like, okay, I'm in. I want to make sure I don't get caught. I want to make sure that I'm not relying on the things I just did to get back in if I get caught, because chances are those are all going to get IOCs entered. They're going to get blacklisted. I'm not going to be able to do what I just did again. So you get your foothold. And then once you're in, you got your foothold, you have moved maybe off of the initial system that you landed on just to be safe. Now you have to go back. I should make this loop again. Then you have to go back and do your intelligence gathering again. I'm on a new computer now. I'm inside of an environment. What can I see from here? What does this computer have access to? Network-wise, information-wise? Can I get to data shares? Can I get into this person's inbox? What are they emailing about? Can I get credentials for some of these places? Can I get network diagrams? Can I get just general communications about where things are stored? Who's on vacation this week? That sort of stuff. You're doing more intelligence gathering inside that system. What computers can this computer now see that I couldn't see before, that I can maybe move into? What has changed in the environment since last I looked? Are there admins logged into new systems than last I had checked? And you just keep going around in this loop. And then you say, all right, now what can I exploit from what I can see now? Cool, I've exploited it, I've done something else, I'm in here. What do I do from here? Maintain persistence. Have I found the gold I'm looking for? And am I at the stage of like, all right, now I have to figure out how do I get the gold out of here, whatever. Anyway, you get it. It goes in this loop over and over until I have stolen the gold from your organization. Attackers, it's really important to point out through all of that attackers don't exploit, how do I put this? We don't exploit, I should have had this slide up before when I was ranting about it. We don't exploit software vulnerabilities, right? Let's look at how many CVSS 10s, how many like 10s on that CVE scale came out. How many have we seen this year in major operating systems? Like something that would allow, we're talking remote, unauthenticated code execution in a very stable method against a Windows operating system. We've all seen these in the past 5 years, right? How many have we seen this year? Who said 0? Yes, 0, right? How many have we seen in the past 5 years? About 3. You are on it. Shout it louder. Yeah, about 3, give or take. Some 9s, some 10s. Those are the useful ones for an adversary who's trying to burrow into a network, right? I want that remote code execution. I want it unauthenticated because generally I'm not authenticated. I want to be able to execute the code as an administrator because I'm usually trying to get the computer to do or allow me to do things it might be normally restricted from doing. And when you have a flaw inside of Windows or a major operating system that allows for that, usually you hit like a 9 or a 10 on that CVSS score. And then what happens? You can say like, oh, well, past 3 years, you're probably still going to see those out there. What happens when Microsoft gets a flaw like that, when they see that? What does Microsoft do about it? They put out a patch, right? Like as soon as they're aware, like they drop everything, they develop a patch, and they put out an emergency out-of-band patch, right? So you're not even talking about waiting until Patch Tuesday to get that plugged. Like this might get plugged. Usually this is plugged before it hits the news. So when your parents are hearing about this on the news, because usually when it's something this big, it's on the Muggle news. When your Muggle parents are hearing this, that patch has already been rolled out, and it might be a Wednesday, it might be a Thursday, and so now you also have corporations emergency out-of-band patching these things because it's that big of a deal. That is all to say that even in the instance where I do have access to a vulnerability of this scale and this ease of use where I can just skate in, it's the amount of time that's actually available is super limited. And that's the big ones. Now you talk about the smaller ones, a lot of these like big CVEs we see come out, they're usually inside of software applications, right? And a lot of times, at absolute best, you can only execute code as the user that ran the application. Most of the time, you can't even do any code that affects the operating system. You're just able to maybe exfiltrate some data out of the application. Most of the vulnerabilities we're seeing, these are application-based, and you can't really do anything outside of the application. That can be super useful, for sure, if you're trying to steal data from an application. But if we're trying to like get deep into an environment and get to the point where we can transfer money out, right, steal credit card numbers, steal intellectual property, some of that may involve application exploitation, but generally that's a very small part, if any part at all, of what you're trying to do. So that's all to say that like, oh, the vulnerability scanning and the patch cycling, yes, that's all critical. You should absolutely be doing it. Please, God, don't think that I'm telling you to not do this. But that is only covering a very, very, very tiny attack surface that we as the adversary are using. You're ignoring the rest of it. Because like, what are we exploiting? I keep getting like one slide ahead of myself. We are exploiting configuration problems in the environment. We are exploiting insecure situations. We are exploiting overworked systems administrators. We are exploiting overworked developers. We are exploiting the fact that everyone is told to do something securely, but they're told to do 10,000 things securely. And when you look at the stack of what's most important when you're implementing new technology in an environment, it has to work, right? First step, does it work? Okay, cool. And then next, often, especially if you're talking technology implementation, now it has to be secured. Where we get most of the time, especially like the larger your corporation, the more this happens, your administrator, your dev, whatever, devs, get to the point where you go, okay, it works. Let's roll it out. Like, let's just get it working. And it's working, and it's out there. And okay, now when we get a chance, we're going to come back and we can start securing it. But per the project, it just has to be implemented and functional. We've done it, cool, we can close the project, we're on time, we're under budget, cool. And I'll just make a little note here that says like, hey, you know, when you get a couple days of free time, go back and make sure you secure this stuff. Who here has ever worked in IT? How much free time do you get? How many days a week do you have to just be like, oh, let me go look at my backlog? No. When do you look at your backlog? It's when you're on vacation, right? And you go, well, I can finally knock this out. Yeah, that's what we're exploiting. The stuff in your environment that does not come up on their vulnerability scanners. Let's move on here. Also, I could go back to this a little bit. We also live off the land. We are not bringing in all of our hacking tools. We are not installing Metasploit and Mimiccats and what the hell are the kids use these days? We are not spinning up a Kali VM inside of your ESXi environment. This is not happening. All of these tools, these hacking tools that your endpoint detection and response stuff is looking for, we're not using these because it's how you get caught. And often, like, just the act of importing these and installing these on whatever system I landed on, that can be dangerous in and of itself because, like, okay, I'm on a system, I don't have local admin, I need to do something to escalate my privileges, I have this one hack, it's a little noisy, it might trigger something in the EDR if I try it. I'm certainly not going to blow that one, what's effectively like a very hyper-local O-day. I'm not gonna blow that one trying to install Mimiccats here. What we generally do is we live off the land. We exploit what the operating system is generally able to do on its own using commands, tools, equipment inside the operating system itself. And we're also doing things that the user on that system is generally able to do. We do often have to, like I said, do privilege escalation to try and get that user to be allowed to do more things. We'll talk about that later. But overall, the stuff that your EDR and your vuln scanners are looking for is not what the attackers are out there doing. Now, that's not to say nobody's doing it. Who is doing it, that's the automated stuff. That's the botnets. That's the low-hanging fruit on the adversary side. That's the spray and pray. Those 100% are out there, and 100% should be the first things that you're defending against for sure. So now you've got that squared away. You just can't think that you're done. So let's move in. We're starting with an organization. We have a company name. I'm on my couch. I have a laptop. I'm going to do my reconnaissance. First thing I like to do is you look at their domain. What did I use here? Target.com or cityofchicago.org, whatever. Yeah, so I was using, I think this was the Target corporate. Anyone here from Target? I think we're in Minneapolis, right? Nobody here is from Target. Cool. So what can you get from a domain name? You can reverse that. You can get IP address out of it. Okay, great. Who gives a crap? I have one IP address. What do you do with an IP address? Nothing, right? That IP address is part of a subnet. It's part of a range of IP addresses that this company has purchased for their use. And now that range can be tiny, it can be massive. What I was looking at here, and I'm pretty sure this was just what I got from Target.com, I was looking at a /16. How many IP addresses are in a /16? Shit ton, correct. Right, just like 1 to 1.5 shit tons. And that's an insane amount. They have a /16 on the freaking internet. Do you know how much that costs? More than a shit ton, believe it or not. It's not a 1-to-1. Exponentially more shit tons. And if they bought all those IPs, they sure as hell they're gonna use them because they're expensive. So then, now I've got an ocean of IPs I can start scanning through to look for other interesting things. Like you go to Target.com, it's like, what do you got here? Generally, what is it? It's a web app. You can go shopping, you can put stuff in a cart, you can buy things, you can log into user accounts. It might talk to an inventory server, but you're really narrowed down to like just what that application and its associated APIs are supposed to do. Like the Target.com application is not where a Target employee goes to log into the VPN or their webmail. That's somewhere else. Where is it? Fucking, I don't know. Let's figure it out. I bet it's somewhere in this freaking /16 they have, right? Scanning, who's ever tried to scan a /16 with Nmap? How long is it? It has some cool noises coming out of this. How long is that going to take you over the internet? Say it. A shit ton of time. Yeah, and we don't got a shit ton of time, right? So what I did is a lot of who's familiar with MassScan? MassScan, the tool MassScan. MassScan is a great tool for scanning massive swaths of the internet. However, it's really inaccurate if you try to get it to do very specific things outside of just like, is an IP up or not? It's great for, is there something here or not, very fast. After that, diminishing returns inaccuracy. So I developed a tool here called Scan Cannon. It's up on GitHub. You'll see the QR code again. And this just lets you go through, and it combines MassScan and Nmap in very specific ways. You can see like the intense nmap strings down there. To figure out what IPs at least have something listening on them extremely quickly. Then it starts interrogating those IPs. And it doesn't just go and find out every single listener on every single IP and what it is, what it's doing, and get banners and crap. Because again, that's going to take you forever, especially if that /16 is super populated. What it does is it looks for very commonly, easily exploitable listeners. You're looking for a VPN connector. You're looking for SMB for sure. You're looking for remote desktop. You could just see the ports there, right there. I think I still got over here. Let's try the magnifier one. Like his list of ports: 21, 22, 23, 445. You guys know 1701, 1723 is your VPNs. 3389 is remote desktop. It's looking for stuff that usually. Heck, let me ask you guys, why am I looking at these? Why do I care about all of those specifically? What's that? Right, but like, there's a lot of things. I could look at every listener and look at banners and software versions. Why am I specifically looking for, let's say, 445, 3389 VPNs? Who said it? Remote access, sure. Overall, yeah. Remote access, and they authenticate against Active Directory, which means if you're able to authenticate against these things, in a valid manner, you now have a valid Active Directory login for not the application that it might be on this web server that you're looking at, but their internal network. You are now an employee. And a lot of these listeners also are things that you can really do spray and pray stuff at. You can get yourself a list of usernames, passwords. Anyway, I'm going to go into that in a second. So that, like, I built this tool to very narrowly look at a very specific subset of things that are very commonly attacked, and that you can automate the attack thereof to be able to worm your way in as quick as possible. You can also, a lot of things I like to do is do something like Eyewitness or something like that. When you find web servers running, start taking screenshots of all of those web servers, look for the ones that have logins right there on the front page. Because if you look at a web server's main page and the first thing you get right in the center is a login, chances are that's going to be a network login. Sometimes it's the application login, but if it's like just a web page and it's just right in the middle, here's a login, that's usually something really important. It's usually not like a customer portal. Sometimes it can be. You're going to have to look. But just looking through here, what am I looking for? I'm looking for that webmail login. I'm looking for like a VPN up there. You can see I got some old Shodan numbers here. Just straight up VPN logins. Just millions, absolutely millions of them out there. I really, really, really love VPN logins because many times in 2024 now, those are abandoned and forgotten, and the company thinks that they've been shut down. They think, oh yeah, we shut all that down when we moved over to our Zscaler. That we don't do that direct VPN anymore. Nobody uses it. It was shut down. And then maybe they did shut it down and then literally powered that thing off. And then somebody new in the data center turned it back on because the machine wasn't fully decommissioned. It was just turned down and it was marked for decommissioning in the next IT cycle, which might happen in a year and a half. And then somebody's like, oh shit, this is, whoa. SolarWinds said this machine's down and it's supposed to be on. And the guy who knew why it was down is gone. And I'm the new guy. And I go, well, fuck, I'm going to go turn that on. Turn it on, boots up, communicates. Oh, cool. Fixed. Awesome. And now your VPN is back online. And it's still authenticating against AD. And it doesn't have multi-factor on it. Because that's the other thing I'm looking for, right? Stuff that doesn't have MFA. People have, so many companies have the biggest MFA blind spots. Every single means of authentication across your environment, both internally and externally, should have MFA on it. Most people are going like, oh, we have MFA on our Office 365. We're all set, man. Nobody's getting in here. Is that how people like even authenticate to your like internal resources? Probably not. Maybe a few, but definitely not all of them. I exploit the shit out of this once I'm inside, because it can be hard to find stuff outside when you're doing, like, a lot of people will protect their, their edge with MFA, and they'll find all their logins, and you're like, great, man. So you have to find another way in. We'll talk about finding other ways in a second. But then when you're in, it's like just spray and pray city. Nothing inside here has MFA. Let's just start blasting the shit out of every username and password we can find and hope it works because there's no MFA. What else I'm looking for? Documents. Documents, documents, yes, they have words that can tell you things. Some of those documents are useful. They have things like, hey, are you trying to connect to our VPN? Here's how. You need this piece of software, run it at this version in order to connect, and that's super handy, right? What else do documents have? They can potentially have passwords. I would hope that it's like hitting the lottery when you find a document hosted externally that has like, and you're the first guy in, probably not. They have metadata, and that metadata can have a lot of interesting things. Like one, it can have IP addresses of the computer that was used to make this document. That's a real common one, so at least kind of gives you an idea of what their internal network looks like. It's stuff you could start writing down. This is all stuff we're writing down. We're writing down where are all these logins I may be able to exploit. What are IP addresses internally, externally that I know about? This is all, we're just recon, we're just writing crap down right now, right? It's going to have names of people who created those documents. And if you're talking like technical IT documents, like, hey, here's how to connect to our VPN, that might be somebody with some elevated privileges internally, right? Because they're writing technical documentation. So that person, you got a name. What do you do with the name? We'll figure it out in a minute. So you're going to have names. You're going to have IP addresses. You might have computer names. Computer names, if they are guessable, they might be able to allow you to guess other computer names in the environment, tell you what to look for. Like if something is called file server 1, you might go look for file server 2 and 3, things like that. Again, just more stuff to just kind of write down. And again, you have screenshots of all the tools that I use to do this. And please, like I said, take pictures, or you can get the slides later. I know I'm going really fast. So now we've ripped a ton of stuff out of these documents too. What else am I looking for on the edge? I'm looking for applications that I can exploit, right? We want to compromise the organization. We're not just trying to compromise a specific application in this case. If we are, like, first thing you want to do is you want to look for the application. You want to look for all of the systems that application talks to. One of the most common ways that applications are getting exploited and having data exfiltrated is by bypassing the application entirely and going straight to the database server that it talks to, the authentication server it talks to. How many times do I see an application that has MFA on the login, but the thing that it's actually authenticating against behind the application doesn't have MFA, and I go, well, fuck, I'm just going to go talk to that. Why am I going to bother with this garbage? There's no MFA right behind it, and it's authenticating to the same thing. So like that can be interesting depending on what your goal is, but I'm going to get more into cloud compromises in just a bit later. One of the things we need when we're talking about all of this authentication is usernames and passwords, right? I find all these places to authenticate. Well, so what? What am I going to just start guessing people's usernames? That's not a great idea. In most environments, especially like the larger the company, the more often you see this, your usernames are going to be something that is predictable. You're going to have like first name dot last name, right? First initial, last name, last name, first initial. Some dots in there somewhere, something like that, right? You're definitely going to have predictable email addresses. It's rare you find a company that has randomized email addresses. That's not useful because humans have to use email addresses. So your email address is going to be somehow predictable. It's usually got your name in it in some form. So I can go on the internet and I can start looking up email addresses from your organization. What's really cool is as technology, as we keep progressing down whatever the hell this technological path we're on is, more and more often we see the email address becoming the username. So it's no longer like, well, I have an email address, but I also have a username for authenticating. Now it's really, especially in the time of SSO and cloud-hosted everything, and SaaS especially, your email address is your username. So now it's more easy than ever to find out what people's usernames are. And if I can just get a dump of like some rando email addresses from a company, and I have a list of names of people I'd actually like to become at that company, or at the very least target, I can take their names, and just throw this layout algorithm, like, oh, I know someone's name is Chris Johnson who created this VPN document, and so I'm going to try log in as Chris Johnson. I don't see his email list in this, coming up at hunter.io, but I know his email is probably Chris Johnson at target.com or whatever, or Johnson C or C.Johnson, whatever it works like. And now I can generate tons of valid usernames. I can go on LinkedIn and look at who works at this company and generate valid LinkedIns just by having their name. Another great place to look, way back, Aaron.net, the first, who knows what Aaron is, by the way? And I just blasted past that. Okay, cool. Aaron, the American Registry of Internet Numbers, it's where you go to buy IP addresses. When you buy IP addresses, you got to give them an email address as somebody who manages all those IP addresses you just bought. Whoever's doing that, probably a really freaking powerful person inside of that organization. It's rare to find an actual good email address there that's not obfuscated, but every now and then, especially really old organizations like I got City of Chicago right here, there's Kevin Kirby's email address, and he is the one who registered all of the IP addresses for the City of Chicago. Kevin Kirby is probably a CIO, probably VP of technology, something really high up, and I bet if I was able to become Kevin Kirby, as far as Active Directory is concerned, I could probably do a whole hell of a lot of damage. At the very least, cancel all these IP addresses and say, hey, we don't need them anymore. But it's not useful to what I'm doing. That's why, DOS attacks aren't the most useful, but if you're just trying to cause chaos, 100%. So that's it. That's as much as I have time to talk for about that reconnaissance phase. Like I said, I would talk about or at least show the slide of what you can do to defend against those things. For this stuff, you guys hear this all the time as defenders, is you should be doing it to yourselves. You should be searching yourselves, Google yourselves, scan yourselves. Look at your edge, enumerating your assets. Asset inventory is, hands down, #1, the absolute biggest security vulnerability on this planet. Nobody knows what they got. Nobody can even define asset inventory. Oftentimes when I ask people for their asset inventory, they'll send me a spreadsheet of computer names and IP addresses. And I go, what about everything else? Like, what about your assets, your intellectual property, your applications? Like, nothing. So know what's out there. Know what you have exposed by doing what I just did to find out what you have exposed. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong slide. Moving into exploitation. Sorry, we all make mistakes. So what I got a bunch of information. I found a whole bunch of different places that I can potentially log into an organization. It looks like some of them don't have MFA on them. That's really cool. Notice, again, I have never run a vulnerability scan. I have not looked for any kind of software, including operating system vulnerabilities. I didn't even bother. That's not, because it almost never comes up with anything, and it's extremely noisy. I don't do that. So we got our logins, right? We have a bunch of usernames. We stole some. We created some. What are we missing? I got a login window. I got a username. Password. I don't have any passwords, right? So I'm going to do a really cool trick here. I've spent. Oh, I ruined my trick. I did it. I like to go like, all right, hey, I'm going to psychically deduce all of the most common passwords used across your organization, some capacity in this room by like everybody concentrate it and throw it at the screen, and I go 1, 2, 3, and then this is what comes up. So I told you I was going to give you the magician's secrets. That's how I do my password psychic game. This isn't. I know this slide is not surprising to anybody. This is the dumb joke we've been making. Like, this is the oldest meme in InfoSec, right? Like, why is it a meme, and why is it still around, and why do I have a slide with numbers like 2024 on them? Because it's still happening, kids. You're still doing this. You still have like help desk KBAs that tell that person to manually enter a new password for a user account and then tell that user, here's your password, and make sure you change it. You know what I see a lot of times now is people at least remember to set the password change bit. So like, all right, your password is now Burger King 1. When you log in, you're going to be asked to change your password. And that person goes, okay, and hangs up and goes to lunch. So many times I find when I log in with Burger King 1 or Fall 24 or whatever it is, that I then get prompted to change my password because somebody left their account that state. And I'm like, fuck, will do, man. Now, yeah, I'm going to set a really good password. Yeah, and so the other takeaway from this is just the core problem with asking people to make passwords and what's wrong with passwords. Passwords are garbage. You should never be using passwords anywhere in your organization. Eliminate passwords. That's a strong sentence, and it's tough to do. Passwords are trash, and we need to move away from them. There's lots of ways to do that. I'm not going to get into that. The biggest problem with passwords is that people make the passwords, and people can't remember things, so they have to think of ways to remember things, and they get cute. They think they're cute, they think they're funny, or they're lazy, they're annoyed with you, especially this, like, I mean, we know, we under, why am I doing this? I have a $100 pointer that does this. So under crap, like we all know this is common. Why? Why do people use why are they using for seasonal, like for password rotation? Who said that? Right, 90-day rotation. What happens every 90 days? The seasons change. And they're like, wow, I've been working here for 6 years, and every 90 days I got to come up with a new password. I don't know anymore, man. I'm just trying to work. And this is what you get out of them. And then they go, oh, well, you need a capital letter now. All right, well, I'm going to capitalize the first letter. Like this is like, forget that this is seasons. Like, look at the other information we have here. This is what everyone does. Capitalize the first letter. Oh, you need a special character. I don't fucking know. What's the first special character on my keyboard? It's an exclamation point. I'll just throw it at the end. Oh, you need to have a number. I'll just add the numbers at the end. This is what everybody does. So even like seasons aside, you can guarantee nearly everyone's password in your organization is the first letter is capitalized. It ends with numbers, probably ends with the year, whether it's 2 numbers or 4 numbers, definitely ends with an exclamation point. So seasons aside, I can already like get really close to guessing what your passwords are. This crap is still all over the place, especially when you're looking at service accounts. Again, because people don't change them. People go, oh, I just got to make it work, and once it works, I'm going to go in, I'll go back next week, and I'll fix it, and they don't. Especially because sometimes they realize once it's working, they can't just go back and fix it. And so that's there forever, and then they hope nobody finds it. This one is something Chris Nickerson turned me on to forever ago. Again, people think they're funny, they think they're cute, and they might be both. But they're easily exploitable, and that's the most important aspect of this. They think, oh, I'm going to get back at it. I hate this place. This place sucks, so I'm going to make my password, fuck this place. That's one of the first things I'm guessing. This is my password list. And I get so many hits on that. So many hits on that. That's not like a little funny thing I found at one, that's not like a fun fact, fun story. That happens all the time. And the other thing is, I use this tool called CEWL, C-E-W-L, to just scan a website, your company website, to see what your company does and see like the terms it uses to describe itself, which gives you an idea of culture inside of the company. And a lot of times you'll see people using company culture as a means of making their passwords. Throw that right in there. And then you add your 20 or 24, you add an exclamation point, capitalize your first letter because you think you're smart, and that's it. No, and now I got just an ocean of passwords. And so then I start throwing those at the logins I found. Burp Suite lets you do this in the non-free version, but it's honestly, I feel like Burp Suite is more trouble than it's worth. People just know it. It's absolute chaos inside of that application. I'm a bigger fan, and a lot of people are going to roll their eyes at this. I just write something in Python that does it. And if you're like, oh, no, tell me to write some code, it's going to take you 2 seconds. Like, you ever want to learn Python, JavaScript? For one, like use the right language for the job you're doing. Like if you're talking to web servers, use some JavaScript. This is a great place to start. Write an authenticator. Write an authentication scanner. It might be 4 lines depending on how good you end up getting it. And it's a great place to start. And so, yeah, there's other tools. There's Hydra, Ike Force for VPNs. Metasploit has tons and tons and tons of spray and pray crap in it. Depending on what you're trying to authenticate to, there's probably an automated tool that's there that's going to be able to do it. Note that these tools generally have a fingerprint in how they operate, and a lot of EDRs out there and edge protection systems, WAPs, things like that, are able to detect these tools really fast, which again is a great reason to just go make your own. It's not that hard. I promise you it's not that hard. Please, if you don't know any scripting language, tonight, write something that authenticates against some garbage login like this in Python or JavaScript. And you're going to get hooked. You're going to not stop doing stuff like this now. Absolutely, you should be writing your own tools. Let's see, what else? Mail Sniper. Great tool from Black Hills. Black Hills InfoSec. I think we all know Black Hills. They found this really cool vuln inside of EWS. What does EWS stand for? Exchange Web Services. We're talking Microsoft Exchange. We're talking the mail server system that Microsoft Exchange uses. Exchange is, yes, still used in Office 365. It is part of the back end. So Office 365 initially wasn't susceptible to this. I'll tell you what this is in a second. It is now. So overall, what's happening here is EWS, because of the way that it has to operate and interact with certain mail clients, does not support MFA. You cannot put MFA on EWS. And so if you have EWS on in your environment, and in your environment also means inside your O365 cloud, or wherever the heck people are authenticating against or passing mail through, you're probably susceptible to this. And this goes all the way back to what I was talking about with, hey, all right, I got an application that has MFA on it, but does the server that it talks to have MFA on it? No. So I'm just going to go talk to this. A really cool tool called Mail Sniper. Another great fact about Mail Sniper is the email address is the only valid username. Oh wait, no, it does both, but it absolutely will always authenticate using an email address as a username because it's an email system, and so it will, if all you got is email addresses and you don't know what the username format is, Mail Sniper is a great place for you to get started. It's cool because it just spray and prays passwords and usernames, logs into inboxes, and then also lets you just start skimming those inboxes for data. Lets you search for terms, lets you see shared inboxes. What other inboxes does this account have access to? Can I start digging through those, looking for communications, passwords? People love to email passwords. People love to go on vacation and email their password to everyone else on their team. It is my absolute favorite. If somebody's on vacation, 2 other people on that team have their password, and it's probably in their inbox. Who was that heavy sigh? You don't have to raise your hand. We all felt that very deeply. This stuff, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this. This is cheating. Phishing. Phishing is such cheating that let me go back. This woman on the top is one of my favorites because this is every single InfoSec worker's reaction to when you clicked on the worst email they've ever seen written their entire life. They're like, why? How? Why would you click on this? How? So phishing, you go look at every breach report ever, 90%, and that's hyperbole, but it's going to be close. It's going to be somewhere above 70 of breaches, especially the major breaches. How do they get in? Phishing. Phishing is so common and it works so well that when I was a consultant pen tester, I was not allowed to phish on a lot of the engagements because the customers would say, I know phishing works. That's not useful to us. Please do something else. And I'm like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? I'm like, yeah, no phishing. Phishing is out of scope. And you're like, fuck, fine. Phishing works because what does phishing do? It says, oh, hey, click on this thing. So you're bypassing all of the edge protections. You're bypassing WAFs, firewalls, blah, 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 because you're tricking an internal computer from making an outbound connection over the internet, usually on 80 or 443, something all of your firewalls allow everything to do. And it's usually running some piece of malicious code that bypasses whatever EDR is running on your endpoint, which is easier than you think it is. Don't think that like, oh, I pay for the best EDR out there. It's going to be real hard for somebody who's going to craft an O-Day piece of software that's going to be able to bypass CrowdStrike Falcon. CrowdStrike Falcon is great. It's very effective at what it does. In the past month, have watched an off-the-shelf $100 piece of malware bypass CrowdStrike Falcon. It's out there and it's cheap as shit. And these criminal organizations who make those things are very interested in making sure that they are always out there able to bypass modern EDR, and B, that they're always very affordable because they're usually selling them to people in places where $100 is a lot of money. But to me, I got $100. Robert's seen me spend $100 on some real dumb stuff. I'll spend it on some EDR bypassing malware for work. For teeth, oh man, I got so many. If you guys want some extra teeth, I got them on me. There you go. You ever want to mess with somebody in a good social engineering engagement? Drop some teeth out of your pocket. It really derails the conversation fast. Y'all think I'm joking. So phishing, great way to get in. And then you're at least in there, right? And now you can start doing your second phase. Overall, aside from that, I said I would talk about cloud exploitation and cloud infection one more time. when I officially started working on this for 2024, I was like, I'm going to have to really revamp this entire talk. I'm going to have to delete a bunch of slides and get real deep into how how attacks against people's cloud infrastructure is happening. This is a huge thing. This is how most people are getting in. Not most, but a chunk of people are getting in. I'm really going to talk about this. It's very complex. And then I started writing things down, and I was like, no, it's the same old shit. All they're doing is they're getting into an application that you're running on your cloud server somewhere in Azure, in AWS, wherever it is, and then they are figuring out how to run code as whatever user is running that application, do some privilege escalation, blah, blah, blah. Like I said here, OWASP top 10 their way through the application, and they really are, and I'm talking like SQL injection is still like in the top 5. Are you fucking kidding me? So they're just OWASP top 10 their way through the cloud app, and instead of all right, now I'm on the server and I'm going to try to move laterally, one of the first things they do is they start stealing tokens for your Azure infrastructure, whatever it is. And now they're like, oh, cool, I have a token that I can use to do other things inside the cloud backend because I'm a validated user and a validated machine, and let's start seeing what access I have to here. And that's how they start messing with everything on the cloud backend, including making themselves new machines that they can operate out of invisibly and things like that. So it's actually not that complex. It's just OWASP top 10 crap, except one more step at the end, steal the cloud token and go from there. What they're doing, aside from that, once they're inside of their, either way, it's a weird place to put that, but I'll talk about it anyway. Once they're in, they've landed somewhere in the environment, they have a user account, they're able to start talking to people, or start logging in as people. One of the first things we are absolutely seeing is that they're going into our chat clients. They're going into Teams, they're going into Slack. We saw this with the Uber attack, right? This is super common. They go into our chat clients because it's no more having to call people and speak with the correct accent and use proper grammar. Like, they're going, first off, they're just sitting and they're doing recon in your teams. Really, I should probably move this into the post-exploitation, but they're doing recon inside your teams, inside your Slack, looking at all the conversations you have, looking for keywords, seeing who you talk to about what, how you talk to them. And if you work in finance and you see like, hey, whenever you need to initiate a financial transaction, you DM this person and you ask them in this way and you provide that information. I'm going to do that right now. And all the other person sees is, oh, it's Frank. It's Frank, who often asks me to do financial transactions. And it's Frank giving me the information he often gives me. Sounds good. Thanks, Frank. I'll do it tonight. That's getting to be real common. Aside from all that, if you cannot figure out a way to get in, try some top 10 vulns. I got this list from CISA. CISA posts like a top 20 or top 25 vulnerabilities that they see actively exploited in the wild. What does actively exploited mean? It means it works. And it means it works real well because it's extremely common, which means it's generally probably works well enough that it's not humans doing it, it's bots doing it. It's crappy scripts doing it. So that means these are real effective. Who wants to point out some fun facts about this wall of text? Who sees a 2019 up there? By the way, I really want to point out, I grabbed this top 10 list in like March of this year. And again, actively exploited vulns. So there you go. There's some 2019, some 2020. I mean, there's no good. I don't see a 23 or 24 on this list, right? We can just keep going deeper. If that doesn't work, just keep going down the line. It's an absolute nightmare out there. And part of it isn't because people aren't patching. It's because they have these blind spots. It's because they have assets they weren't aware of. Shadow IT can exist on your edge. It's real. You need to be looking for this stuff. And shadow IT also means it's not inside like your patch cycling architecture. It's just getting missed, and it hasn't been patched by since 2019 when somebody stood it up. Slides on what to do about it. Don't have time to go through it. Like, you guys can go take a guess. Also, I'm here the rest of the con. We could talk about this forever. I'm happy to mansplain post-exploitation to you. Let's dive into it. One of the first things I like to do once I am on a system, I need to make sure that if that person reboots the system, if that person closes the window that initially executed the code, that's not going to stop me from being able to get in. Need to make sure that their system is still going to phone home back to my C2 infrastructure. And I also want to make sure I'm able to execute code as a privileged user. Now, in most cases, that's super fucking easy because in most corporations, everyone's a privileged user. because we're all special snowflakes, and we all need local admin to read our email. I don't know, I'm not an IT admin, maybe that's true. I assume it's true because of how often I see it, that's all I know, man. So one of my favorite things to do is to actually inject my malicious code, my callback code, into the EDR process itself. Because EDR processes, some are starting to do this. Most of them are not inspecting themselves. And so I love to just inject myself in there because nobody suspects CrowdStrike as the bad guy who's on the system. And you can ask CrowdStrike to go scan everywhere, and it's going to go, looks good to me, man. And meanwhile, my malicious code is inside CrowdStrike's pocket, running stuff as it. I'm not going to get into how to do that. There's stuff to do that inside of Metasploit, inside of Veil. There's a trillion YouTube videos on that one. But it's a real fun one. I just like to point it out because it's just so damn funny. And so now I am on a machine. They can't get rid of me. They don't know I'm there. What do I start doing? Well, now I start doing my listening. What is there to see? And it's not just a matter of looking through Nmap and going, okay, so what other computers can I talk to? What services are they running? Let me find some more logins. That can be a part of it. But also, like, passively listening once you're on the network is where things get real fun. And so I run a tool called Responder. This is like the first. In fact, Responder is like so first step that like most of my scripts have Responder just built into them as like the first thing they launch. Responder, if you don't know what it is, go look it up. It actively or passively listens to all requests for various multicast services, I'm trying to put this succinctly, across a network. So like, let's say a computer on your network is looking for a certain file server and it can't find it. And it asks DNS and DNS goes, I don't know. What it's going to use then is something called MDNS or multicast DNS, and it's going to ask everybody else in that network, hey, does anybody know the IP address of the server? Responder is going to go, yeah, I do, man, it's me. And then that remote computer is going to go, cool, can I please connect to you? I need a file. And the responder is going to go, well, hang on. I got to make sure you're who you say you are. Please authenticate. Please give me your username and password. And then that will happen. Then the responder goes, sounds good, man. And this all happens in the background. This does not prompt the user. They don't get a login window or nothing. This is asking Windows, and this is it uses Windows services and processes to do this. It's doing a lot more than just that. It can mimic all kinds of servers. And then it's collecting hashes that either can be used for pass the hash attacks to then directly authenticate against some other things in some certain cases, or it is collecting crackable hashes, and then you can start throwing those at your password cracker, which I'll talk about a little bit later. That's what we're doing there. We also got a great tool I love that actually got shut down and then rebooted, called Crackback Exec or CME. I actually think I have to look into this. It got rolled into something else, I believe is what it was, real recently. But this is a great one to also just, this is like Nmap for SMB. That's how I'll put it. Nmap for SMB. This thing, you blast it across the network, and it looks at all of the SMB shares that are out there. It connects to everything on 443. It sees who will allow null sessions to connect, which means you can just connect with no authentication mechanism. What those null sessions allow you to look at and view and dump out of there. One of my favorites is connecting to domain controllers with a null session to get the initial password necessary for a machine to join the domain, which is an old method of doing that. It was the recommended method for a while. It's absolutely still out there. And then you can join a machine to the domain and go from there. But it also allows you to go see who is logged in where and dump their tokens and their password hashes from those machines that they are logged into, which can be super helpful. And in some cases, pass hashes to log into new machines. And then it does the same thing. You give it a pile of creds and a pile of tokens and a pile of hashes, and it just blasts across the network and tries to see where those things are able to be used and what it can find using those credentials. And it gives you a really nice layout there, and that gives you days worth of fun to start having, depending on the size of the organization. Going back to password cracking really quick, and I got about 5 minutes. Let's see if we can do this. I think we're getting close. Going back into password cracking, you might go, man, password cracking, like you need a 6 GPU rig, and I got to spend $10,000 on this thing, and I need hydroelectric power, or I'm going to go broke to run this thing. And that's if you're dumb. Passwords, generally, hey, that's if you're dumb or if the entire organization like forces somehow everyone to use a password manager and forces them to make like 100-character randomized passwords. I've never in my life seen this. Humans are going to do human things to make human passwords, like I said. And now they can get more complex. They can have their kids' names and dogs' names. And my old joke of like, man, I got to change my dog's name every 90 days, and he's really getting confused. Poor guy. You can like throw various word lists. I'm not like password cracking is its own art, and it's really easy to get really good at it really fast. I have cracked plenty of passwords on this Apple laptop and way older Apple laptops that didn't have discrete GPUs in them by way of making rules, especially if you can discern what the, like I said, you can join a machine to the network, you can try to make a user account. If you could discern what the password creation rules are for a user account, which is often something you can get for free by asking a domain controller, now you can really narrow that scope of what a valid password is going to be in this environment. Creating password cracking rules is all about narrowing the scope of what's actually going to work here and what people are most likely to use. And of course, one of my favorite things to do first is to grab this like no end of password dumps here that are human created passwords that you can just try. I don't know what the math is in there. Hundreds of gigabytes, I guess. Probably half a terabyte or more in there. That's just torrents that I am sharing of password breaches. I got half a terabyte of like valid human created passwords. That's super fun. And you wouldn't throw the whole half a terabyte in there. You're going to narrow that down to what's probably likely for the environment. It's really, really effective. Password cracking is not as hard as you think it is. You do not need 6 GPUs. You often don't need 1 if you're doing it right. So then what else we do? Once we are cracking these hashes, we're getting valid user accounts, passwords. Maybe these users don't have the privileges we are hoping they do. They're not able to execute the code they're looking for. They can't access the resources we need to access based on whatever our goal is. We can at least start logging in and seeing what they can do and see who else they can talk to. One of the other things we run is Mimiccats. Mimiccats is a great way of dumping plain text passwords from memory if you're able to log into a machine. So that bypasses the need to start cracking passwords even. Mimiccats and Microsoft have been doing this really cool cat and mouse game where one figures out a workaround for the other and they keep going back and forth. So if you ever hear Mimiccats doesn't work, wait a month and it's going to work again. So like every time I throw this up, they're like, oh, Mimiccats doesn't work anymore. And I'm like, you update your Mimiccats. And now you're dumping more plain text passwords. Again, you're just getting more and more and more employees to see what that employee is able to do. And then my favorite, I freaking love Bloodhound. Who's used Bloodhound? Show of hands. Cool, good. Everyone should be using Bloodhound in their environment. Bloodhound kind of does what CrackMap exec does, except it does it without any kind of credentials whatsoever, and it doesn't need to be able to authenticate the network to the DC at all. It only needs to be able to be on the domain. So if you have a machine joined to the domain, you can start using SMB to ask every machine out there, what's its name, what users are connected to that machine currently, who's logged in, what AD groups those users belong to. And then you throw that into Neo4j, which gives you these really cool maps. And real quick, I know we're running out of time here. This is a real organization that I had scanned. The red is a machine that has a local administrator logged in. A machine where I'm able to execute any code that I want. This is a low amount of reds for the organizations that I've seen. But what's really going on here is you're figuring out the shortest path from, okay, this person is logged into this machine, this server, and also this other person is logged into that server. So I have person A's credentials. I can log into the same server person B is logged into and now steal person B's credentials, steal that session token from memory. If you can steal a session token, you don't have to crack it. You don't need credentials. You just have a valid session token, and you can use that. If person B is then also authenticated to another server, you can now take person B's token, go over to the other server for which the token is also valid, and say, hey, it's me. I'm just doing the stuff I've been doing. And you are kind of leapfrogging your way through this network map of stealing tokens and logging to other machines, looking for the shortest path to a machine that has a domain administrator logged in on it. And so then you, a regular IT admin, log into the machine using a session token that a DA is currently logged into, and you steal that domain admin's session token, and then what do you do with a domain admin session token? You fire the domain admin. Well, it's not necessarily, it's usually their fault because they usually shouldn't have been logged in. Because generally when I'm doing this, it's somebody like, oh, this DA account has been logged in on this machine for like 2 days. Because they always forget to log out. Because a lot of people think, oh, if I close the remote desktop session, that kills the login session. It doesn't. That login session continues for the length of the validity of whatever you set your session tokens for, which can be days. And so the DA thinks they logged out because they closed the window. Nope, that session token is still just sitting there begging to be stolen. So what do I do with that? I move to the domain controller. I log in with the domain admin session token. The domain controller goes, cool, good to see you, Bob. And then Bob goes back to the recon. Generally on the DC, what you're doing is you're going like, okay, I want to make myself my own account so that if they change the passwords or the session token dies, like it doesn't affect me. So you make yourself your own domain admin account. You can go from there. We'll talk about that in a sec. I'm almost done, I promise. I don't think I got to talk about Kerber roasting. Kerber roasting, everybody familiar? Go Google it. Kerber roasting is another great way, if they're running Kerberos inside their environment, of being able to pretty much execute anything as domain administrator without being one. I'm not going to get deep into how it works, but it pretty much just gives you like God tier level access by generating a golden ticket. Great stuff if they're not set up to defend against that. And then Kerberoot is another one, and Petit Podem is a great thing that actually exploits misconfigured, certified pre-owned, how do I put this? It exploits the problem with setting up certificate services inside of Microsoft environments. It's complex, it's difficult, it's confusing as shit, nobody does it right, and somebody wrote some really cool scripts here that just exploit all of the things people do wrong that effectively, long story short, allow you to trick systems into thinking you're somebody else and giving you elevated privileges that allow you to like really, at domain administrator level, devastation across a company. So then, cool, now you're a domain administrator. What do you do then? So then what you do then often, so your goal is not always to become a domain administrator, right? Your goal is to get the gold, whatever the gold might be. This is the most common, like shortest path to doing that, so that's what I use there. If you can do this without becoming a domain administrator, that's even cooler, but it's just usually you're like, all right, the goal is to try to be a DA, because usually in organizations, they give domain administrators the ability to do anything they want. Nobody locks their DAs down. Everybody's like, no, the DAs should be God. They should be allowed to log into every machine and every application and every server and do anything because there's only 6 of them and somebody has to be God and it's them. It's not at all the way you should be doing this. So what are we seeing now? Really, it's just ransomware. That's all. Nobody's, like, we're seeing the occasional like transference of funds, but the vast majority of the time, it's just ransomware. You become domain administrator, you give that domain administrator credentials to your ransomware installer, and because it's allowed to log into every machine on your network and install whatever it wants, and installs your ransomware, and that's how we get these situations where there's 1 trillion ransomware servers inside of a company in a day. So I got post-exploitation slides there, how to defend against a lot of the stuff, but again, most of it is, hey, run it first. Some of it is, hey, here's ways to configure this. Stuff like, hey, you should grow a spine, stop the rim, right? You should be alerting every time a domain admin logs in. Who sends out an alert that starts an incident response every single time a domain admin logs in their environment? Nobody. That's nuts. A domain admin should almost never, ever, ever be logging in, because what's the one thing a domain admin needs to log in to do? Configure a domain controller, right? Everything else should not be using a DA account. In fact, you'll have vendors that tell you, oh, if you're going to run our EDR, it has to run as a domain administrator for this. I bet they're wrong. I bet they're wrong. So anyway, like, you should be alerting on domain admin logins. And it should be really easy, like, oh, incident response, but okay, any DA login should have a ticket associated with it. The incident response starts up. Is there a ticket for this? Yes, there is. Let me DM Frank. Frank, is this you? Frank says, yeah, okay. Now, there's ways to exploit that, sure. But like, you should be doing something. Because this is the way we're seeing tons of this ransomware happen, is DA logins. Why aren't you alerting on DA logins? It's probably because you're letting your DAs do whatever the hell they want, and that's your problem. But anyway, please download these slides because, man, there's so much good defensive stuff in here. So this is your homework for you guys. I'm like just over the hour now. Here's one you'll like. It's the appendix of all the tools that I'm using here. So take your pictures. But really, I'm going to put I got the QR code at the end that's going to have all these. So sorry for everybody who sat in front of this poll. Just like half of the room. There's another one there. Just so many tools that I talk about here, including on the defensive side. Like a lot of these tools are like, hey, here's things you can do to actually protect against this sort of thing. That's it. Thank you. Here's that QR code again to grab the slides. Find me elsewhere. And I'm around the con the rest of the time. So bye.